Welcome to Groton, Connecticut, the submarine capital of the world.
When the U.S. Navy needs submarines, they come to us.
As Marine drafters at General Dynamics Electric Boat,
we design our military's most strategic assets.
The Columbia and Virginia-class submarines.
Our hard work guarantees decades of record profits for General Dynamics.
Our CEO salaries are booming.
So why do we feel like we're sinking?
Our town has been building ships for over 125 years.
but living here is getting more and more unaffordable.
They divided us with tears.
They take away pension for all new workers, all while enjoying record profits.
Thanks to government contracts.
But we're done putting up with corporate greed.
Now is our time.
We're leading the fight to win back pensions.
We're raising our wages to where they need to be.
From cost of living adjustments to profit sharing.
We're going to fight for what we deserve.
We are Electric Boat. We are the union.
And we are standing up as United Auto Workers.
Good evening, UAW family. Tonight I wanted to take some time to talk about what's going on with our economy, with our country, and our union. There's a lot to cover, and I know there's a lot of uncertainty about what this moment holds for the working class. Big picture, we're in the middle of two massive transformations. One is in our economic system, where the rules of global trade are being upended, and with huge implications for workers everywhere. And the other major transformation is in our political system, where fundamental rights are being eroded with huge implications for workers everywhere. Both of these changes are happening at the same time. And I know that can create a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the future. But tonight, I'm going to talk about what's going on, what our union's doing about it, and what it means for the working class. But first, before we get into this, as always, I want to recognize and honor our members that are out there standing up against corporate America. Workers at Alamo Drafthouse in New York City have been on strike for more than 50 days. They're taking on parent company Sony, which fired 70 workers so they could add more to their overflowing coffers, and the workers haven't backed down. At Wellesley College, non-tenured track faculty have been on strike for 2 weeks, and they're demanding a livable wage. At Cummins in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, UAW members who make components for military and heavy construction equipment are currently on strike. Like so many UAW members, they're saying hell no to tears. This is a company that made $13.2 billion between 2022 and 2024. They can afford to do better. And at Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics Electric Boat, our defense industry members are fighting for a better life, and they're ready to do whatever it takes to get it. These companies are reaping billions in profit and don't want to give workers their fair share. But UAW members at these companies are fighting back. They're demanding decent pay, fair treatment, and retirement security. Nearly a year ago, Volkswagen workers in Chattanooga made history, voting 73% to unionize. After 8 months of bargaining, they're fighting for a record contract, but Volkswagen's stalling. They're breaking the law, and they're refusing industry standards on health care, cost of living allowance, and profit sharing. Last week, Volkswagen even blocked workers from bargaining sessions. When they did that, here's what they showed. They showed they're scared, and they know it's the workers who have the power, and they're going to keep pushing till they win the record contract the company can afford. All of these workers are also showing that the UAW's mission remains the same as it's ever been. Our mission, no matter which industry, which company, which president's in the White House, is to take our power back and raise the standard for the working class. So I'm going to talk about three things tonight. First, I'm going to discuss where we stand as a union in this political moment. Then I'm going to talk about political attacks happening against the working class. And last, I'm going to discuss what's happening in the auto industry and why our union is hell-bent on ending the free trade disaster of the last 30 years. So let's get into it. One of the great divide and conquer tricks the ruling class has played on the working class of this country is to see politics like a spectator sport. They want everyone who chooses to wear a red hat to hate everyone who votes blue. If you're on the blue team, you have to hate everything the red team does. Both sides talk about bullshit issues to hype up their fan base, while the real issues that impact working class people are never addressed. In the labor movement, at our best, we have a different way of doing politics. We don't make politics about personalities or parties. We see politics as a negotiation. We don't sit down to negotiate with corporate executives because we like them or because we trust them. We focus on what we need as a working class and what the hell it's going to take to get it. And we do that whether we're sitting across from the friendliest CEO or the meanest Wall Street con artist. Politics are just like contract negotiations. You win what you have the power to fight for. And that's exactly the situation we find ourselves in right now. And I want to be very clear on this point. There's been a lot said about this. We're not aligning everything we do with the Trump administration. We don't align with any politician or president. We're negotiating with the Trump administration. Our approach to President Trump is no different than our approach was to President Biden. And it's no different than our approach at Stellantis or Columbia University or General Dynamics. I keep hearing people say, oh, how UAW loves Trump now, or the UAW only supports Democrats. It's all bullshit. Our union has a clear North Star, and that's the working class. It's the workers. And the working class's issues don't change because somebody has a D or an R next to their name. For decades, our unions fought to end the free trade disaster. And that was true under Republican administrations, and it was true under Democratic administrations. When we say we will never give up our First Amendment rights to speak out, whether it's against genocide or for our union rights, that's true no matter who's in office. It's true no matter who agrees or disagrees. That's not flip-flopping, it's called integrity. And one thing we've always fought for, under Democrats or Republicans, is an end to the free trade disaster. We've seen some reckless and chaotic activity on trade from this administration, and there's a lot of fear of disruption. But what we have to remember is that disruption's not new to factory workers in this country. Disruption is what we've been living with for 30 years under a free trade disaster. It doesn't mean we support reckless random tariffs. I don't believe that's the answer to all this. But there is a reason for tariffs. And it's also a mistake to just defend the status quo, especially when it comes to free trade. A lot of politicians and pundits are suddenly concerned about our trade agreements. But where was that concern when we lost 4 million manufacturing jobs in less than a decade in the 2000s? Where were the pundits when 90,000 plants closed in the wake of NAFTA? Where was Wall Street when the Big Three closed over 60 facilities in the past 20 years? See, that's the difference. When working class people suffer, it's just the cost of doing business. When it's Wall Street's asses on the line, then it's a crisis. And I know we're all tied up in the fate of this economy. We can't afford a recession. And my question to the country is this: can we afford 90,000 more plants closed? There are 13 million manufacturing workers left in this country. We can't afford to let employers threaten 13 million families every day with destroying their jobs if they dare to demand their fair share. And I want to be clear. Free trade has been the most harmful government policy of my entire work life and most all of our entire work lives. We have to end this free trade disaster. And we don't care if it's a Democrat or a Republican who ends it. The question is, we do care about these things, but the question to me is simply this: how do we not only bring back and protect our jobs, but also protect our right to organize and our right to collectively bargain? How do we fight to blow up the billionaire economy while also defending attacks on our right to protest, our right to retire with dignity, our right to health care? It's not enough for politicians to talk a good game about wanting to bring back jobs. They need to be good union jobs with good standards. And we have a good reason to be suspicious that the Trump administration is not interested in supporting the right to organize or bargain with things we're seeing. Because so far, here's what we've seen from the Trump administration. We've seen the destruction of bargaining rights for 1 million federal workers. That's not good for the working class. We've seen attacks on the National Labor Relations Board, including illegally firing a board member, leading to deadlock on workers' cases. That's not good for the working class. We've seen attacks planned on Social Security, on Medicare, on Medicaid, programs that millions of workers depend on. That's not good for the working class. We've seen the absolute trampling of constitutional rights. We have seen the First Amendment go up in smoke at college campuses with detentions, deportations, expulsions, and firings of people who dared to speak out against and protest against a war, just to call for a ceasefire. We have seen the right to due process disappear as working people are deported for no crime and no reason. That's not good for the working class. Mahmoud Khalil, who has now been detained for over a month for protesting the war, is a former UAW member. Grant Minor, the UAW president of Local 2710 at Columbia University, was expelled for protesting a war the day before the bargaining was going to start. Ramisa Ozturk, an SEIU member at Tufts University, has been detained for writing an op-ed. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a sheet metal apprentice in Maryland, was deported for no reason, no crime, to a prison in El Salvador. We've seen the arbitrary and unlawful termination of hundreds of our members' visas, which may lead to their unjust deportation. And the list goes on. And there is a reason we campaigned aggressively against this vision of America in the last election. We will continue to speak out against it and mobilize against it. This week, our union participated in mass protests around the country as part of our campaign to kill the cuts at the National Institutes of Health, or NIH. The NIH is a part of the federal government that funds essential scientific research. That's not waste, it's not fraud, it's not abuse. We represent 5,000 members who just won their first union contract at the National Institute of Health. We also represent tens of thousands of members whose jobs rely on funding provided by NIH at universities across the country. When we cure cancer, when we save lives with new medications, it's because of these workers who bust their asses on high-level research that changes the world. Our government should expand funding for life-saving research and allow researchers in the U.S. to be the first to find cures for diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's. Cutting research funding kills union jobs, and even worse, it kills the hope of working people who rely on this research to see new treatments to save the loved ones' lives. It kills the hopes of the millions of Americans who are caring for family members with Alzheimer's to see advances in prevention and treatment. It kills the hope of a parent with a child of a rare disease whose only shot at survival is a clinical trial. One of the first things the Trump administration did was go after NIH funding. And why did they do it? For the same reason they have done so much of their agenda: to steal money from the public to pay for billionaires' tax cuts. It's that simple, and it's that short-sighted. And this is the same reason they're going after higher education workers and institutions. because they want to use political leverage to claw back funds to pay out to the billionaires. Last week, we joined a lawsuit to kill the cuts to NIH funding across the country. This week, we hit the streets and rallied in D.C., in New York, Philadelphia, Seattle, L.A., the Bay Area, and many more cities to save thousands of jobs and life-saving research. And we're beginning to see the results. On Friday, a judge ruled against the Trump administration's first round of cuts at the National Institute of Health. And we're already seeing more National Institute of Health funds being released despite the Trump administration's efforts to loot our scientific research for billionaires' gain. But the fight's far from over. When we speak out against these actions, we get called liberals by the right-wingers. When we speak out in support of tariffs, we get called right-wingers by the liberals. People say we're flip-flopping or we're doing a 180. The truth is, what we are doing is acting with integrity. If you want to destroy our unions and our government and attack our members, we're going to oppose you every step of the way. If you want to undo our broken, unfair trade system and raise the standards for factory workers, we'll go to the mat to support that. Because we aren't Democrats and we're not Republicans, we are trade unionists. And I want to take some real time to dig into what's going on with trade and these tariffs. I know there's a lot of confusion, a lot of hype, and a lot of chaos. And if we were running the show, it would look a lot different. But there are a few things we should all understand about our trade rules and about these tariffs, because they affect your life, they affect your future and your family. Big picture, we need to acknowledge something. Free trade has been a disaster for the working class. And this is how the free trade scam works. The government gives a green light to companies to build their product wherever they can find the most exploited workers. Countries where desperate people will work for $3 an hour, where there are no labor laws, there's no environmental regulations. Then the companies kill jobs in the U.S. and run a race to the bottom across the globe. They force workers across borders to compete with one another. And the companies ship product back in at a massive profit, which they pocket for the executives, for the shareholders, and pay off the politicians for good measure. Meanwhile, we get Flint, we get Lordstown, we get Belvedere, we get communities that look like a bomb got dropped. We get divorce, we get drug addictions, we get suicide, we get deaths of despair, and I don't need to tell you, so many of us in the UAW have lived it. And what do consumers get? They get price gouged. What does Wall Street get? Massive profits. What do politicians get? They get huge campaign contributions from companies and the billionaires that are flush with the cash. And what do voters get? They get politicians bought off by corporate America who continue to pass laws that harm the working class. And what do foreign workers get? In Mexico, they've seen their real wages cut in half since NAFTA passed. Let me repeat that. You know, the big promise of NAFTA was it was going to lift up the standard for everybody. But taking inflation into account, the average real wages of Mexican auto workers was about $6 an hour in 1993. Today, the average hourly wage of an auto worker in Mexico is $3 an hour. NAFTA has been devastating for auto workers in the United States and Mexico. Who benefits from the free trade status quo? Wall Street and billionaires who get fat payouts while we all get screwed. So when we say the free trade disaster has to come to an end, it's what we mean. Where do tariffs come into play with that? In our view, tariffs are a tool in the toolbox. They're a first step. They have to be well designed. They need to be paired up with other policies and changes. But they are a start to stop the bleeding. So let's dig into the details about where our union stands on tariffs and trade. Here is our position as a union on tariffs and free trade. Number one, free trade has been a disaster for the working class, and we have to end these broken anti-worker policies. Number two, we can and should reshore tens of thousands of jobs in very short order, which would raise the standard for all workers. Strategic tariffs can play a role in that. Number three, the automakers, the auto market, and corporate America can't afford it. So let's get into the details on these tariffs. Right now, there are three main kinds of tariffs on the table. Some of these tariffs target entire countries. Some of these tariffs target specific industries. Big picture, we support some use of tariffs on auto manufacturing and other similar industries. We don't support the use of tariffs for political games about immigration or fentanyl. We do not support reckless, chaotic tariffs on all countries at crazy rates. We absolutely support and have always supported tariffs on the auto industry, on heavy truck, and on agricultural implements. The difference is the auto tariffs are designed for a specific purpose. They raise the cost on the companies that have killed good jobs in a race to the bottom for cheap labor elsewhere, while Wall Street makes a killing. Specifically, we have industries where right now there are active plants operating under capacity in the U.S. while workers outside the U.S. are exploited for $3 an hour. We have excess auto production capacity in the U.S. We could bring back tens of thousands of jobs in a matter of months. That's before we even talk about building new plants. We're talking about adding shifts, adding lines, and adding jobs, making products that we know are profitable. That's not pie in the sky, that's just common sense. Companies could do this immediately and bring back tens of thousands of jobs. And let me give you an example of this. 6 months ago, over 1,000 workers were laid off at Stellantis' Warren Truck plant. For 80 years, that plant has operated and built profitable vehicles. Recently, the company decided to move production of the Ram truck to a plant in Mexico where workers make $3 an hour. That's nothing but a race to the bottom. Instead of paying workers $37 an hour, they're paying workers $3 an hour. But the interesting thing is, when they do this, the price of the truck doesn't go down and the wages in Mexico don't go up. Instead, company executives and shareholders pocket the difference while 1,000 workers' lives are upended here in Michigan. And there are tons of plants all over this country just like that. We took a look at just a handful of Big Three plants. We wanted to look just at the recent past. We asked ourselves, how many more vehicles could we produce if we went back to the levels that those plants operated at just 10 years ago? And the answer is staggering. 10 years ago, 12 Big Three plants that are still in operation right now were producing over 2 million more vehicles every year. 2 million more vehicles per year. These plants still have that capacity right now. That's tens of thousands of jobs that we could bring back right now. Our research tells us that if the Big Three alone just got their currently active plants up to 100% capacity, they could add 50,000 jobs. Let me say that again. If they just used the plants that were already running and hired up to full capacity, we could add over 50,000 jobs at the Big Three alone. That's not even including closed plants like Lordstown Assembly in Ohio, which could bring thousands more jobs back. That's not including building new plants. And don't forget, for every 100 auto assembly jobs that are created in the United States, there are another 700 jobs created in the supply chain. 50,000 more jobs in the Big Three means hundreds of thousands of more jobs at parts suppliers and other businesses that support it. That's not even including non-union automakers. That's if we just stop letting the automakers get away with murder by running a race to the bottom under our broken trade deals. The other thing we hear about these auto tariffs, they'll be too expensive for working people. The automakers can't afford it, so they'll pass the cost on to the consumer. And we call that what it is. It's bullshit. It is exactly what we heard in our stand-up strike. It's what the bosses say whenever workers have the courage to demand more of their fair share. Back in 2023, we said record profits mean record contracts. Company executives said our demands to raise wages and in-tiers would force them to raise prices. They said the industry would never survive. Turns out the companies lied. They could afford to do the right thing then, and they can afford to do the right thing now. Here's a chart that shows the price of a new car next to the automaker's price gouging. See how the profit goes up right alongside the price? That's because they're price gouging, and they've been price gouging for years. That tells us that we shouldn't trust the companies when they say they can't afford it. It also means there's flexibility in the price. They don't need to pass the cost of auto tariffs on to consumers because they're already making plenty of money. And where do those profits go? Wall Street, plain and simple. The profits don't get reinvested in new plants. They don't go to the workers. They don't go to the federal government to fund Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. In the past 15 years, the top 10 automakers have made $1.6 trillion in profits. They have funneled $367 billion into stock buyback schemes that artificially inflate the value of company shares and further enrich company executives in the 1%. They could have built dozens of plants here for that money. They chose not to. They chose to loot the Rust Belt to pay off Wall Street. And we must end this cycle. The auto tariffs are a first step in ending the free trade disaster. And with things that are going on with labor and things like that, we don't need to trust Donald Trump or any politician to fix it for us. But I want to be clear about this. The Trump administration is the first administration in my lifetime that's been willing to do something about this broken free trade system. Tariffs are the first step. But we need to put out our vision for an auto industry that doesn't leave behind working class people. And then we need to fight like hell for it. In 2026, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or the USMCA, which is the new rendition of NAFTA, is up for review. And in the last presidential election, the candidates from both the Democrat and Republican parties agreed we need to rewrite that deal. The fact is, under the USMCA, auto workers are still living under a race to the bottom. Mexican auto workers are still having their union rights trampled on. American auto workers are still under constant threat of plant closures. We want to sit down at the bargaining table and renegotiate the USMCA trade deal today. A new trade deal for North America should have a manufacturing minimum wage. Workers on two sides of a border should not have to compete with one another in a race to the bottom. A new trade deal for North America should make it so if you want to sell product in a country, you have to make a product in a country. That would be good for Canada, for the U.S., and for Mexico. A new trade deal should fix the race to the bottom in the supply chain also. We don't want our IPS members, who are just as essential to this industry, to be left behind. We need enforcement mechanisms to make sure that trade is tied to how these companies treat their workers. And we need a trade agreement that guarantees that labor rights are protected in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. So that's what we're fighting for. And already, dozens of members of Congress have called for renegotiating the USMCA. That's the first step. But we also know that new trade policy won't fix it all. We also need a plan to rebuild the auto industry beyond just fair trade rules. We need to invest in America. Under the Biden administration, we started to see some of that investment. We need to be there when rules are put in place to make sure investment isn't abused by corporate America to undermine workers or the auto industry standards we've won. We had to spell that out for the Biden administration because when they started their trade deals, again, working class people were an afterthought. They have to be first and forefront of anything we do when it comes to trade deals. And as we mentioned, right now, we have capacity ready to be used in auto, but also in heavy truck, also in agricultural implements, also in aerospace. We are ready to work and rebuild the Rust Belt, but we need investment. We also need new labor policy. We've talked for years about the broken labor laws in this country that make it nearly impossible for millions of workers who'd like to join a union to actually do so. It wasn't corporate America that built the American dream. It was the labor movement. And it's the labor movement that will save the American dream, but our laws have to change in order to do that. Finally, we need to seriously take on Wall Street. There was a time in this country when it was illegal to do stock buybacks to pump up your share price. It was illegal. You couldn't just strip companies for parts and sell them off to make a buck for shareholders. When corporate executives had reasonable limits on compensation, there was a time when there was a corporate tax rate that pushed companies to reinvest in their companies instead of looting them. Right now, trade is on the table. Think about it as collectively negotiating job security with the federal government. But we're not stopping at trade. Our message is simple. We're coming for our fair share across the board. And we've been very clear about what fair share looks like. It goes back to our 4 core issues. Number 1, a living wage for everybody. Not a minimum wage, a living wage, a wage you can support a family on. The second thing, health care for all. We can't keep living like this, where people can't afford to go to the doctor or risk bankruptcy. The third thing, a dignified retirement. The majority of the working class in this country have no retirement savings. We need to expand Social Security and Medicare so people can actually have a life after they give decades to these companies. And we're going to the mat in May 2028 to win that at the Big Three after years of being left behind. And number 4, it's a life off the job. Nobody should have to work 2 or 3 jobs or spend 80 hours a week in a factory just to live paycheck to paycheck. And I've said this a lot recently, we disagree with 99% of what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to attacks on labor and working class people, attacks on free speech. We are supporting national mobilizations against the Trump administration's attacks on federal workers and immigrants. We've joined lawsuits against the Trump administration's attacks on higher education institutions. And I cannot stress enough how strongly we oppose this administration's attacks on our freedom of speech and basic civil liberties. We also oppose the free trade disaster. We oppose these policies under Republicans and Democrats, and we will support their reversal under Republicans and Democrats. We aren't going to change our position on ending free trade just because Trump's president. But no matter what party you voted for, understand this. There is a direct line between the free trade disaster and the political chaos in this country. Plant closures and mass layoffs resulted in intense pain and suffering and anger for hundreds of thousands of working families in our country. All that pain and anger had to go somewhere. A lot of it went to support Donald Trump for president. And now it's being directed at immigrants, at transgender people, at higher education. And that's the wrong target. The right target is corporate America. And the sooner both parties understand this, the sooner our country will begin to deal with our real issues. We need to build a political movement that can put the working class first. And to do that, we're going to need working class people to step up, to speak up, and take on corporate America from the bargaining table to the ballot box. No matter who's on the other side of that table or in that office, we're going to have to stand up and stand strong with integrity on our issues. So with all that, I just want to say, I know that's a lot. It's a lot to talk about. I'm going to look at some of the comments here. I know there's tons of comments. And you have to bear with me because there's a lot. And to say we're for tariffs but for lawsuits against them, no, we're for tariffs that will bring jobs back in this country. And we've been very clear about this. We support the Trump administration with the auto tariffs, but there are, other areas of tariffs that they have to be strategic. And so the lawsuits we've been talking about are lawsuits we joined in when it comes to violations of federal workers, violations of people's freedom of speech and civil rights and all those things. So, and I see a comment, this is how you fix it. America needs to stop working no matter what. Shut America down in all industries. Couldn't agree more, my brother. That's where we get our power. We have to take our power back. Working class people in this country have to come together. That's what May Day 2028 is all about, and we're building toward that. Why can't the president's office answer important questions from locals? Not a peep. Brother, I don't know what local that is or what your question is, but let me assure you, we got a lot of people that work their asses off every day to support our locals. And, if we have issues, we want to fix them. Good comment here. I mean, I'm sorry you guys are facing this awful situation. Good people work hard and earn an honest living, shouldn't be jobless because of greed and management. And that's what this is all about. We've been very clear about that. What about big truck builders? Let me tell you, we got to stand up for big truck builders. It's a shame what's going on right now. It's a shame. It's the same situation everywhere. It's a shame that Volvo and Mack Trucks made a commitment to build a new plant here, and they've shifted gears now and say they want to build that plant in Mexico. There's no excuse for it, and we do believe and we are hopeful that the Trump administration will address tariffs in that area with heavy truck industry and stop that from happening. We believe that will happen. So, we'll see we'll see how things play out, but we're pushing that every day. I see this thing about, I hope the union got on that insider trading that went on yesterday. Schwab made $2.5 billion. Our benefits depend on the stock market as retirees, and they do. I mean, a lot of us have 401ks, and it's important. But, we can't underestimate the importance of having jobs. Without jobs, there are no 401ks, and, the wealthy will just keep taking more. So, the focus has to be on bringing jobs back. When you lose 90,000 manufacturing facilities in a country, it's amazing we still have an economy in this country. And that's what this fight's about. And that's why, when people say we're flip-flopping about tariffs, we're not flip-flopping. We're not flip-flopping on who we support or don't support. We've been very clear from day one on our position when it comes to politics. People that support issues that we believe in, no matter what party they are, we're gonna say we agree with them when we agree. And people that go against things we do, we're gonna call balls and strikes on that too. And we've been very clear. I mean, and I don't want to understate this. We are very appreciative of what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to automotive tariffs, because I'll tell you, my entire work life as an adult, all I have seen and all we've seen is plants close year after year, and we've seen our manufacturing base leave this country, And we've seen people on both sides of the aisle that were unwilling to do a damn thing about it. So, you know, we may not agree with every aspect of the tariffs, but we sure as hell do believe that what they're doing with auto is a good thing. And it's a good thing for Americans, it's a good thing for our communities, and it's a good thing for jobs. You threw Mack Truck under the bus. No, we did not. We bargained like hell for Mack Truck, and like I said, we're hoping like hell to get that situation turned around. Yeah, we don't have to support the entire platform of any party. They need to support UAW and American labor. And let's just talk about that. I mean, let's just be honest here. I mean, we talk about trade and the broken trade system. I mean, both parties own it. You know, George Bush wrote NAFTA. Bill Clinton was the president that adopted it. And it's very unfortunate. And I tell you, it's got worse every year because even when NAFTA was put in place, at that time, 60% of Democrats voted against it, but it passed, and there were a lot of Democrats that supported it, including President Clinton. And the interesting thing is, you know, you talk about politics nowadays, you know, we've had to fight like hell to get Democratic leaders to even stand up about trade, and most of them wouldn't. And there's no excuse for that. So, you know, there's plenty of blame on both sides of the aisle when it comes to, you know, our issues. And that's where we have to focus our politics. You know, there's talk of like, you know, independent people running for office, things like that. We still, no matter what party, if it's independent, Democrat, Republican, whatever it is, we have to look at the people, look at what they stand for. And if they don't stand for our core issues and for what's good for working class people, union or not, at the end of the day, it's not going to be good for us. And so, you know, I talk about this a lot. There's a video, it's a Mouseland, it's called Mouseland. You can Google it. It's a story of the Canadian movement for the New Democratic Movement back in the early 1900s. And it's a really interesting story about basically how politics work. What we have to do is we have to reorganize our thinking in this country when it comes to elections. We keep voting for billionaires and millionaires and, you know, business people that run corporations and you know, people that are high income people. You know, we need to start electing working class people that look like us, that know what it's like to show up at a factory every day or work in a hospital, you know, or work in a school. That's who we need to be electing to represent us in Congress and in the White House. Because if we want things to change, that's what's got to change. If we keep electing rich people on both sides of the aisle who take money from rich people and corporations, things are never going to change for us. So we've really got to focus on that moving forward and not buy into the billions of dollars that people dump into political campaigns to send a message to villainize people that actually are legitimate candidates that we should be voting for. You know, where were you years ago after I invested my life in the auto industry and my life is at an end? Hey, you know, we've been here. And the thing is, like, you know, this is the thing, that's the biggest thing we're doing. You know, we're getting back to our roots as the UAW, as a union, you know, that's a fighting union that puts the membership first and puts working class issues first. This isn't about me. This isn't about, you know, our executive board. This is about working class people, and it's about the workers out there in all the places we represent, and even the ones we don't represent, because even when we bargain great contracts, other people benefit. You look at the big three contracts, look at what happened after that. You know, the non-union auto companies gave 10% wages increases on average. You know why? Because they're scared shitless that workers are going to realize they have power down there and that they can get a union contract and demand more and have a better quality of living. So, you know, what we're doing is impacting workers everywhere. That's why strong labor unions are important. That's why a labor union is important. And that's why we have to have strong legislation that allows that to happen. And those things are under attack right now. It's got to stop. Staying together, we have to look beyond ourselves, but to the UAW as a whole and what's best for everybody. I think that's good to close on. I mean, look, that's what this is all about. Our strength is in our solidarity. Our strength is in us all coming together, standing together, taking on those fights, and that's how we win. And we've been winning a lot in these last 2 years. We've won record contracts in several different sectors. We, the IEB, the International Executive Board, you know, we decided to create the Department of Bargaining Strategies, and it's been great. We've been going into different sectors like Cornell University and higher ed, with, you know, Daimler Trucks, you know, in the heavy truck industry, you know, with in defense, like with Rolls-Royce. We've done, you know, with those bargaining committees and with that membership, engaging the membership and putting them in the driver's seat, we've won record agreements. We got to keep doing that, keep fighting. We got to keep organizing like hell. So that's the mission. We got to stand together. And so, like I said, we're going to keep doing this. I want to keep, you know, doing more Facebook Lives and get back into doing this so we can communicate more and talk about what's going on. So I really thank everybody that tuned in tonight, and look forward to more of these in the future. So thank you.